Africa has got to be free.
The solution to your problems can be found in your story. I'm Olani Moloi and I live in South Africa, and I would like to appreciate you for taking your precious time to watch this video. And if you want to support this channel, I will appreciate if you can just hit the subscribe button, hit that like button like never before. History is very important. I know in schools or in various schools, when you study history, you are regarded as someone who is not smart enough. You're not intelligent enough according to the perspective of many people. But here's the thing, is because we have been manipulated to the fullest. We have been colonized to the fullest. So that is why we have people like Marcus Garvey, Bob Marley, and many others who kept on reminding us that it's important, it's necessary to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. This is something which is very important. That is why we have people who are like, history is not important. History is not serious. If you don't know your history, you will never respect it, because it's going to be difficult for you to love yourself because you don't know your history. So you should not be fooled by anyone who will say, just let go of your history, or it doesn't matter. Because these days people will tell you, it doesn't matter. You bring this subject, it doesn't matter. You bring the other subject, it doesn't matter to many people. So this is what is happening. So today we are going to talk about this independence of Africa. We are going to unpack everything so that we can see if this is fake or this is real. Because some people are like, we got independence, we are living in freedom, because people think like doing whatever you want, maybe with your body, you can go around insulting people, you have a freedom of speech like nobody's business. They think that's freedom. But freedom is something which can be categorized in many categories or in different categories. For an example, we can talk about the freedom of land, the freedom of association, the freedom to make your own decisions, the freedom to trade according to your own rules. In other words, when it comes to business, it's not only just about like, now I have a right to change my gender, I have a right to change myself. It's not about that. Those are just colonial strategies. First of all, I would like us to talk about the definition of freedom. What is freedom? I don't want to use my own definition because I have my own definition, but I just want to use the definition that everybody, or which everybody can connect with, because I don't want to be found guilty, because we have to meet each other halfway. According to the dictionary here on the internet, it says independence means freedom from control. Freedom from control by an external power. In other words, in order for you to become free, you have to be free from an external power. It can take many different forms. For instance, personal independence means freedom from control by another individual or organization. For an example, when it comes to people who bully others, in other words, they want to make sure that they have control over those people. Whenever they demand money, whenever they demand anything that they want, they have to get from that particular individual or from that particular person. Why? Because they are in control of that particular person. Then as a result, it means that person is not free from external power of a bully. But here's the thing. When we continue, it says, Political independence. Political independence means the freedom of a country, state, or other similar entity from an external government. If you understand this definition, then it means as a country, you should be able to make the decisions by yourself. You must implement your own terms and conditions when it comes to trade rules, trade agreements, licensing, everything, even when it comes to your culture, how you're going to run your country, your policies, your constitution, and everything when it comes to your governance. Then it means you are in control, you are in charge. But when we look at these countries here in Africa, is the same thing that we see here on the definition happening in all of these countries here in Africa. Some people may disagree with me, and some people may agree with me, because based on my perception, I can say it's not happening. It's not happening. There is no freedom. You have to understand that when it comes to freedom, we are talking about something which is completely different. Freedom is not to disobey, is not to make your own rules. For an example, if all of us as a society, we can make rules for ourselves, and all of these rules, they clash against one another, how will the society live together? How will the society be united? This is what is happening in many places, especially here in South Africa. People have their own rules, It doesn't matter whether these rules are moral or they are not moral. But at the end of the day, we expect the society to be united. Because when you ask people, why are you behaving like this? Why are you doing this? People will tell you about the freedom they have, their independence, and their rights. But if you ask them about their economy, if you ask them about the land, if you ask them about many things that are now serious, they have multiple excuses. So that is why people think that freedom is to do whatever you want. Freedom doesn't give you in other words, in order for you to be free, or once you are free, you are also willing to live with others in harmony by following the principles of nature, not the principles of colonialism. But now, let's look at these countries. When did they get their independence, and what is their current state right now? For an example, I just want to focus on Angola. Let me just focus on Angola. Angola got their independence in 1975. They got their independence in 1975. In other words, from 1975 until now is approximately 50 years. Approximately 50 years, if I'm not mistaken, from 1975 until now. But if you go to Angola, you can still see the footprint of Portugal. In other words, the influence of Portugal is still there. The influence of the colonizers is still there. And that is why it's not easy for these countries to develop or to evolve when it comes to economy, when it comes to many other things. Because you have to understand that the strategy of the colonizer is to support someone who doesn't know. I know many people will be shocked. The strategy of the colonizer is to support someone who doesn't know. That's a strategy of the colonizer. That is why when it comes to African leaders, We have people who are clueless. Why? Because there are people who are making decisions on their behalf because they should always say yes, yes. Because if you don't know, if you don't have confidence, you always say yes, yes, because you want to act as if you know, you want to act as if you understand. This is what is happening. This is what is happening. The strategy of the colonizer is to say, you know what, I have given you independence, but I want to leave my footprint here. I still want to influence certain parts of this country, especially when it comes to economy. In other words, 1975 to 2026, from 1975 to 2026, it's a long time for a country not to develop to the fullest. It's a long time. It's a long time. Let's look at Burkina Faso. The Burkina Faso of Captain Ibrahim Traore. 1960, they got their independence. 1960, they got their independence. From who? From France. In other words, I can say, based on history, they had influence from 1960 until when Thomas Sankara took over. But now, because now they were looking for minerals, they wanted to destabilize Burkina Faso, they had to come up with a strategy to say, you know what, this man has to be eliminated. Then Thomas Sankara was eliminated. Then after that, in 2022, a man evolved by the name of Captain Ibrahim Traore. In other words, a man who did what was completely different from other coup leaders. He prioritized his own country. In other words, we can say from 2022 until now, 2026, Burkina Faso is still developing. But if this independence was real, if this independence was really true, in other words, Burkina Faso should be far ahead than where it is right now. You get what I'm saying? In other words, if these people were serious about giving you independence, all of these African countries would be far by now. In other words, when it comes to West Africa, France is still there. It has influence over many countries. These are the colonizers. That is why I'm like, the colonizers are like the red ants. Where they occupy, they destroy, they sabotage, they destabilize. That's their strategy. And then let's look at Cameroon. Cameroon got their independence January 1, 1960. Until today, France still has influence. If I'm not mistaken, the leader of Cameroon is over 90 years old. At the age of 90, can you still be able to do what you could do at the age of 25 or 30 years or maybe 40 years? Is it possible? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But this is how these leaders rule African countries. Not just leaders, but the colonizers. This is how they rule African countries. They will put someone who doesn't know anything. That is why South Africa is where it is right now, because we have adopted the colonial strategies. That is why we always complain about service delivery, complain about all these things, because we always vote for people who are not competent. We always vote for people who don't know anything. And even in our government, government administration, we keep on like appointing people who don't know anything. It has even gone to an extent of interviews. When it comes to multiple interviews, I'm telling the truth, these strategies that you will see on YouTube don't work in South Africa. When it comes to interviews that tell us about yourself, this is how you have to answer the question, this is how you need to dress, this is how you need to do this, and so forth and so forth. That doesn't apply in South Africa, and it doesn't apply in most of African countries. They want someone who doesn't know anything so that they can have influence, so that they can have power, so that they can have control. That's how it works. So that is why it's easy for you to put a 90-year-old in power. It's easy because even if the people on the ground, they no longer want the man, but as long as the colonizer wants the man, it's going to happen no matter what. That is why here in South Africa, if people are like, we want to remove ANC, as long as the colonizer wants ANC there, there's absolutely nothing you can do. Even if 100% of you can say, we no longer want this political party, there's absolutely nothing you can do. That's a sign that we are living in fake independence. If you look at Cameroon, is suffering. Why? Because the leader doesn't care. And sometimes the leader can just go and live overseas for a long period of time. Just imagine you are the head of the state, but you are living in another country. Let's look at DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. They got their independence in 1960. If this independence was genuine, if this independence was real, why Patrice Lumumba was eliminated? Is because this is the fake independence. So that is why the independence of Africa did not just come at the same time that all the countries are now free. They had to strategize that when we come out of these people, we have to, like, for an example, protect our interests, protect our resources, protect our influence, and see how they behave. So luckily, a black man was like, you know what, the colonizer has given us freedom, we can work with the colonizer, and etc. and etc. Then the colonizer realized that, okay, these ones, they don't even understand what independence is. So that is why the colonizer was like, you know what, let me stay wherever I am and still have influence over them. Then they did something which they are good at, is to use one of us to eliminate one of us. Therefore, Patrice Lumumba was eliminated. This is fake. This is fake. And you have to look at those presidents who came after Patrice Lumumba. All of them were puppets. All of them were puppets. This is a sign that is fake. You cannot tell me from 1960 until now, DRC should be where it is. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Let's look at Ghana. Ghana got their independence 1957. They got their independence in 1957. And let me tell you something. Some of these countries, yes, are developing, but they still have influence from other countries. One of the former presidents of Ghana went to America a few years ago to complain about Ibrahim Traore. But Burkina Faso is fighting against colonialism, against colonial influence. But their fellow brother, instead of like, okay, let me just join you, let me just assist you, or let me just keep quiet, he's like, let me just go to America and seek help. Mentally, we are damaged. Kenya got their independence in 1963. But till today, the people of Kenya are still complaining. These leaders, they still take decisions from other countries. They are always influenced to do whatever they have to do. What does this mean? It means these people, they go against the definition of independence. That is why I wanted to prove that this independence is fake. We can also come to South Africa and talk about the freedom now of South Africa, which is 1994. Let's just forget about that 1910, because that 1910 independence of South Africa was fake, was really fake. But let's just focus on 1994. 1994 was fake. 1994 was fake. I'm not trying to discourage people, but 1994 was fake, because you have to understand that the colonizer was strategic. So as I've said, that we were supposed to get independence at once, but it came country by country. Why? Because the colonizers had to strategize that, okay, this system is working in this country. This system will not work in this other country. So we have to like modify it so that it can work. So here in South Africa, they just came up with a strategy to say, you know what? We give you a right to vote. And when we heard that, we became so excited. And they said, we give you human rights. Now you can do whatever you want to do. You can drink like nobody's business. Then we thought that was freedom. And that's not freedom. In this video, I just wanted to prove that the independence of Africa is fake. You have to teach your children as well, because other groups, they teach their children. You have to teach your children that, okay, we're played out here by the colonizers and by some of our brothers and sisters. They played us. This is fake. You have to be genuine to yourself so that you don't expect that much from them, because, you know, if you know that this person doesn't like me, you no longer expect that much from that particular individual. But as long as you give yourself like reasons to say, probably he's acting like this because of me, because of how I behave. Sometimes if someone doesn't like you, you have to know that, okay, this person doesn't like me. I shouldn't expect that much from this person. Then as a result, you become free in your heart. You become free in your mind. In other words, same applies to us. If we can like understand and accept that we are not free, or this independence is fake, we won't expect much from these leaders, because we will also consider them like the colonizers, or how we considered the colonizers back then. Thank you very much. And I would appreciate if you can just hit that subscribe button, that like button, so that the YouTube algorithm doesn't forget you.